7 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few kickers I would look to add on the wire this week. The first guy, Greg Joseph of the Minnesota Vikings. So Greg Joseph has been a popular kicker this season, with a lot of questions about Joseph and him being good this season with the Viking team. So he had a good game once again in Week 6, even though he missed a 50-yarder and a 47-yarder. But he still finished the day with 11 fantasy points, a 27-yarder, 27-yarder, 33-yarder. And like I mentioned, he missed the 47 and the 52-yarder. But right now, I know they got a bye week this week here, is Minnesota going into Week 7. So this week, he's not going to be that big of an add, but he's one of the best kickers in all of fantasy football so far this season is Joseph. I know he got added in 7% of fantasies last week into this week, but right now he's still available in 78% of fantasy leagues, and I definitely would give him an ad or just wait till waivers clears and stash him if you want for next week. The next kick is Josue Gonzalez of the Carolina Panthers. So Josue Gonzalez had a decent career as an Arizona Cardinal, but they moved on in the offseason and went with Matt Breida. But the last two games here, Josue Gonzalez has been solid for fantasy owners. Week 5 versus Philly, a 43-yarder, a 47-yarder, and a 52-yarder, and an extra point. In Week 6 versus the Vikings, a 27-yarder, 43-yarder, and 2 extra points. So he's got a good matchup here, Week 7 at the New York Giants, that give up the 8th most fantasy points to kickers. And we just saw this Giant team get blasted the last 2 weeks, giving the Cowboys 44 points and the Los Angeles Rams scoring 38. So I think this Panther team, they could go for 28 to 35 points in this game. And once again, Josue Gonzalez could have many opportunities, and he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. The next kick is Dustin Hopkins of the Washington football team. So Hopkins, he's been pretty solid this season as a kicker in fantasy, except in Week 4 at the Atlanta Falcons, where he had negative fantasy points. So the last 2 weeks here for Hopkins, Week 5 versus the Saints, a 27-yarder, 43-yarder, and an extra point. In Week 6 versus the Kansas City Chiefs, 47-yarder, 53-yarder, and he missed a 46-yarder but hit an extra point. So Week 7 at the Green Bay Packers, this Washington football team, they're going to have to score a lot of points just to keep up with this high-powered offense of the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. And right here, Dustin Hopkins, he's been solid, like I mentioned, this season, with 4 fantasy games of double-digit fantasy points, and his only down weeks were Week 3 and Week 4. So right here versus Green Bay in Week 7, I think he could have a good ball game, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him reach double digits once again, and he's available in 91% of fantasy leagues. The next kicker I would look to add on the wire this week's Michael Badgery of the Indianapolis Colts. So we know Rodrigo Blankenship missed this game with his injury after injuring himself on Monday Night Football versus the Baltimore Ravens in Week 5. And Badgery, they just signed him off the street hit a 43-yarder and 4 extra points. So Week 7 at San Francisco, another good kicking environment here for Badgery if he's going to play for this team, if Blankenship don't come back, and he could hit a few field goals, I think, in this game. And this Colts team this season, they're scoring points, but they just can't make the big stops and the big plays. So their kickers are getting plenty of work this season between Blankenship and Badgery. And right now, if he's going to be the kicker, obviously, for the next couple weeks, if Blankenship can't come back, he's available in 96% of fantasy leagues, and he's definitely worth an add. In the 5th and final kicker I will look to get on the wire this week, Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. So McPherson, he's been pretty solid this season in his rookie year here, even though we know he's missed a couple field goals last week versus the Packers in Week 5 to shut that game out. Week 6 at Detroit, he came back and had a great fantasy day, 11 fantasy points, 47-yarder, 35-yarder, and 4 extra points. In Week 7 at Baltimore is a bend but don't break type of defense, where I think McPherson's going to have to go out there and try a few long ones. We know Baltimore is 5-1 on the season, and they're a tough team to beat or their circumstances with Lamar Jackson. And I think Evan McPherson in this ball game at Baltimore Week 7, he's going to have a few opportunities, and Cincinnati's going to try to force the issue as well. So that's a few kickers I would look to add on waivers heading into Week 7 of the fantasy football season.